everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm really excited to have you, and we're going to talk about a topic that I have been wanting to talk about for a really long time, like since I started the channel, and I'm going to. So here's my fact of the day. 20 to 40 million people to this day per year are human trafficked around the world. Human trafficking means kidnap, stolen for sex. It means prostitution. It means a whole wide array of different things. And I am going to talk about one of the cases that is most famous for human trafficking and can show you the inward workings of something that I think everybody should know. So without further ado, let's get spooky. Today we're going to talk about Johnny Gosch. He was born in Des Moines, Iowa, and he went missing on the morning of September 5th, 1982, between the hours of 6 to 7 a.m. He was 12 years old, and he was actually on a paper route. And I'm going to talk about his case today. So I am going to put a disclaimer up because it's important that I do. Once you hear this case, there's really honestly no going back. And you're going to find out that no matter what state you live in, where you live, there is a pedophile network or a network of human trafficking around the world. And it's here in America, it's all over the world, and it's highly organized and extremely scary. And Johnny Gosch was like one of the cases that actually laid the groundwork for opening the eyes of America to seeing it. And the sad thing is, it's 2020, so not many people know about this case. So Johnny Gosch was a pretty typical American 12-year-old. He had a dirt bike. He was kind of shy. I watched a lot of interviews of his friends. He liked to play around the house. He just was your blonde hair, blue-eyed little boy. And I don't know if he had blue eyes, but you get my point. So you know how 12-year-olds are. They feel like they're growing up and they want to come into their own and they want to do their own thing. Every day or every Sunday, at least, Johnny Gosch and his father would do the paper route. It was kind of their thing. Well, this particular Sunday, Johnny Gosch told his father, hey, look, I am going to go do this paper route on my own. And they were kind of like, I don't know about that, but they decided, you know what, we are going to let you do this. Now, something I want to talk about before we get into this day is something that happened right before this day occurred. I believe it was like a week or two prior. They went to some kind of a game at a school, and they went there, and Johnny was like, Mom, Dad, I don't want to sit with you. And they were like, that's fine, as long as we can see you. Just make sure we can see you. And Johnny Gosch disappeared, and the father got up and went looking for him, and he found him by the concession stand talking to a police officer. And his father thought it was a little bit weird, but he was like, hey, Johnny, I just need to make sure I know where you are. And then, sure enough, he went and sat back down, and Johnny disappeared again. So his father went looking for him and could not find him anywhere. But then he found him under the bleachers talking to a police officer. And he said it was really weird and it was very eerie and he didn't know why. And he grabbed his son Johnny and he pulled him back, and they decided that it was time to go. And Johnny said, that guy was really nice. I want to be a police officer. Now you may wonder, why am I telling you this? Because it's going to go along with the case, and it builds kind of an impression that there might have been possibility that the police department in the area that Johnny Gosch lived in might have been part of this, or at least part of the cover-up. Johnny Gosch lived in an area called Des Moines, Iowa, And it was a pretty affluent neighborhood. The houses were pretty big. We're talking about a working class neighborhood, not very like crime, a lot of crime in it. So this is just the place where you would live and feel safe if you were raising a family, which is what a lot of people were doing at this time. On September 5th, 1982, he asked his father if he could go alone, and he had said yes, like I said before. And so he loads up his little wagon that newspaper boys used to have, and he ties his little dog onto the newspaper wagon. And he starts walking down the street, and he turns the corner, and he said, and eyewitnesses said, that this car, it was a two-toned, it looked like a small sedan, came up to him and started talking to him. And he basically looked over on the other side of the street where he saw a couple other paper boys, and an adult was over there. And Johnny said, "Hey, can you talk to this guy?" And the guy zoomed off and left. And this was actually seen by eyewitnesses. So Johnny was like, "You know what? I don't feel right about this. I think I'm going home." So he took his little wagon and he started walking home. But at this point, somebody came out between, there's like a path leading to where he was between the houses, and a person came out between two houses and basically grabbed Johnny or did something, and the car came back, and they said that the next sighting of Johnny, he was slumped over by his wagon, and they believe that he was thrown into the car, and the car made a left turn and started driving to the expressway that was very near the way that they were going. Johnny was completely gone. His family only knew that he was gone because they started getting phone calls from their neighbors asking where their newspapers were. And so Johnny's father ran outside, and he was like, "I'm going to go check on Johnny." And he found his wagon and he found the dog, but he could not find Johnny anywhere. So he came back, and he was in a complete state of panic, and he went to his wife, Noreen Gosch, and was like, "I can't find Johnny. He's totally lost. We have to find him." And so they went and searched for him. At a certain point, they called the Des Moines Police Department, and this is where it gets a little bit shady. The Des Moines Police Department basically said that there was nothing they could do because at that time there was a law that you had to wait 72 hours before you can report a person missing, which is absolutely incredible if you think about it. That was not going to work out for Noreen and her husband, Johnny Gosch's parents. They decided that they were going to go ahead and conduct searches for themselves. Now, at this point, you're going to actually see what kind of police corruption existed in their town and how you could possibly think that they had something to do with this network. So they would literally make like a search party because the police wanted nothing to do with it. And the police officer, one time, he was drunk and he went out and he was like, "Go home, everybody. Johnny's just a runaway. There's nothing to see here." Can you imagine that happening nowadays? Like, I can't really. That would never happen. It would never happen. Like, the police are so much better now, and thank God, because that's crazy. But yeah, this is the kind of things that like the police did. And the police chief that was chief at the time, he actually had to resign 6 months after the whole Johnny Gosch incident, and basically he was quoted saying when he was asked about the Johnny Gosch case, "I don't give a damn about that woman or that kid." Something like that. I'm sure it's a little bit different, but it's pretty much the gist of what he said. And that got published in the paper, And so there was an investigation on him, and actually, I believe like 5 to 7 police officers made complaints about him, and then they found all kinds of corruption. Like, if any people that he knew got tickets from the police, that he would basically fix it, that they didn't have to get the tickets. He had intervened in his own son's legal problems with the cops. He had helped officials. There was just like a whole bunch of corruption. And so he resigned 6 months after the Johnny Gosch case. So that just gives you an idea of what the parents of Johnny Gosch had to deal with. So there was a new chief of police, but I've watched multiple interviews on him, and he's just really like not willing to admit that maybe he might have dropped the ball, because he says that, there was no evidence, there was no crime scene. He just vanished into thin air. Okay? It took him 10 years until he interviewed the siblings of Johnny Gosch. 10 years. There's a bunch more, but we're going to continue this story. So Noreen and her husband, they basically would not take no for an answer. Noreen was a very strong-willed person, and at that time that was kind of hard because, strong-willed women, they're crazy, especially at that time. And so it actually went around that, like, Noreen was crazy, and it's sad because she was just basically fighting to find her son. And it got to the point where people were driving by her house saying, "I hope your son is dead." Like, what? Really? But she kept going. She organized searches. She had a hotline. She had buttons. She had like a private investigator. She did everything. And she was just like a powerhouse. And the interesting thing about Noreen is that before this whole incident happened, she actually had a husband before, Johnny Gosch's dad, and he got really sick with cancer. And before he passed away, a tornado hit her house, and 2 of her children were like face down in the dirt, and she had to literally pick them up out of this house that looked like it got smashed in half. And like she picked them up and they were alive. And then a couple weeks after this incident, her husband died of cancer. So that gives you a really good idea of what kind of a woman she was. I'm thinking she was pretty much a survivor. A year after the Johnny Gosch incident happened, another newspaper boy went missing. This other boy that went missing, immediately Noreen Gosch and her husband went to meet them and basically talk to them because they knew exactly what they felt, and they wanted to help them. And they went to the police department, and this all happened in Des Moines. And they went to the police department and said, "You need to investigate the fact that this could be related." And the chief of police again said, "You know what? There's no way that they're related. The only connection that they have is gender." Okay, it was on the same day. They were both newspaper boys. They were both white. They were both like around the same age. They almost looked alike, and they were in the same city. Okay, I don't know. All right, and so that was another incident that was like really frustrating because like no one was, they felt like the police department wasn't doing anything, and honestly, they were not. So Noreen Gosch basically goes to the police department, which by the way, they absolutely hated her, and says, "When are you guys going to get the FBI involved?" And they basically said, "No, we don't need to get the FBI involved. This is just a runaway. It's not that big of a deal. There's no crime here. There's no crime here. She has no son, but there's no crime." Okay? So I think she ends up contacting the FBI herself, or she has somebody else contact the FBI. And the FBI actually said that Noreen Gosch and her husband were loons. They were quoted saying that. They were loons. And one of my favorite interviews of Noreen is her saying, the FBI basically told us that because we are looking for our son, that we are loons. So this is basically saying to the whole world, if your child goes missing and you want to find them, that you're a loon. Which, I mean, I'm honestly very surprised because the FBI, I kind of hold them to a pretty high standard. And to hear them quoted saying something like that honestly shocks me. So time goes by, and about 2 years later, another boy on Sunday, a paper boy, tells his mom, "Hey mom, save me some pizza. I'll be right home. I'm gonna go deliver the, newspapers." And he goes missing. So you have 3 boys that are paper boys around the same age in the same area all go missing. And there's no connection, according to the police department. And what's really interesting about this is that Johnny Gosch and the second kid who went missing, they actually were the first children to ever be put on a milk carton. So you know how you always used to see like these kids on milk cartons? Maybe some of you guys are too young for that. But Johnny Gosch and the boy that went missing after him were the first to be put on it. And that's honestly kind of great because that really got a lot of information out there. So it was like a very interesting case. And unfortunately, Johnny has never come home. But there were some things that happened throughout the years that were really crazy. 10 years after the whole incident happened, Noreen Gosch and Johnny Gosch's father ended up getting a divorce because it was just so stressful on them that they couldn't handle it. And so, Noreen went her way, he went his way. Noreen did end up remarrying, and I saw like an interview of her new husband, and they asked him, "What do you think about Noreen Gosch?" And he just he broke down and started crying, and he was like, what she's been through is like so incredible. What is even more interesting is about 12 years after Johnny Gosch went missing, there were some pictures that actually showed up to Noreen's front steps. And she thought it was just like a nice little package that someone had left for her. But once she opened up the little envelope, there were pictures of these boys bound and gagged. There were a bunch of single pictures, and there were pictures of 3 boys on a bed. Now, Noreen instantly said that these were her son. She recognized the birthmark on him, and I guess he had like a mark on his leg, and she said that there was a picture of that. Johnny Gosch's dad said he didn't think that was him. He said his feet were way too big. But I mean, I'm a mom, and you know your kids. Or maybe there is a chance that she wanted to see her son and she kind of made that happen. I don't know. But part of me wants to say that you will always recognize your child. So she brought these pictures and she took them to the police department. She actually took them to a couple police departments, and they said that the pictures were ruled to not have anything to do with her case. And they never did any investigation on it at all. At all. There was another police officer who said the picture of the 3 boys on the bed were actually models, and he was pretty sure that they were modeling for a pedophile. And he had found out who they were, but he was unable to tell the identities at the time because they wouldn't come forward and say that anything has been done wrong to them. It just sounds very shady, sketchy, cover-up-y to me. So, she's still doing her thing. She works for helping find other kids. She runs into Adam Walsh's father, which is John Walsh, and he runs America's Most Wanted. And she gets him to take the case on And basically, he says, if we can't help you, nobody can. So they do like a whole thing. They help her with an investigation. And Johnny Walsh was actually interviewed about Johnny Gosch and said that he felt that they were the only ones working on the case, that nobody was working on the case, not the FBI, not the police department. It almost seemed like nobody wanted to find Johnny Gosch, which, I mean, that's what it kind of felt like as I actually went into it. And then there was another piece of information to the puzzle. It turns out there was a man that came forward who said he had multiple personality disorder, which, by the way, most people who have multiple personality disorder usually have some kind of sexual trauma in their past, but the person that came forward said he was a victim of sex trafficking and he was actually recruited to sex traffic. They used him to get children into this pedophile ring. And he actually came forward and talked to the police about it and told them about how he would go to Boys Town in Nebraska and like drive around and get these kids and basically take them and use them for sex trafficking. And it was kind of like this big deal because the sex trafficking was for high ranking officials, and one of them was this man named Larry King. And he was like a really high ranking official, and he actually like had something to do with this credit union called the Franklin Credit Union. And that's a whole nother story. It's called the Franklin Cover Up, and it's basically about all these kids being sex trafficked for, government officials, police officers, FBI agents, all having sex with children. And the bank ended up getting closed down, and it was very strange because Larry King got convicted of embezzlement but never sex trafficking, even though there were people that worked in the credit union that came forward and said that children were being trafficked through the credit union. So if you're interested in that, I might do that one because it's kind of cool that it's like connected to this case. But it's called the Franklin Cover Up. If you actually Google it, you can find out a lot of information about it, and it'll show you how big these like pedophile circles are. So let's go back to the man with the personality, multiple personalities. He's very important. The really crazy thing is they did a lot of interviews with him, and like you would watch him and he would put his head down and then he would put his head up and he was a completely different personality. And a lot of the interviewers that interviewed him said that there was no way he could make that up. But what was the most interesting thing is that he said that he was part of the crew that was at Johnny Gosch's neighborhood and ended up kidnapping Johnny Gosch. So why would you say that if you didn't do that? And so immediately Noreen got involved, and she said that she had to take a couple days before she wanted to go meet. It would take me a couple days too, but she said she also knew that he was a victim as well. So here is where it gets a little bit crazy. So she goes up there and she talks to him, and they're both crying, and he admits it, and it's a very heartwarming moment. But he writes a map down and shows exactly where the car was, where Johnny was when he got taken, how he got taken, what time he got taken. He explains the stutter and stammer that Johnny Gosch had when he got nervous. He explains that he had a scar on his tongue from biting his tongue as a child. He had a scar on his left leg. No one would know that except for Johnny and his parents. And he also talks about the birthmark on his shoulder. These are things that have not been released to the public, so there's no way he could have known that. And the police department said that he was incredible or uncredible because he had a mental illness and he was lying. And what's kind of cool is that he stuck to his guns, went to court, and basically refused to take his testimony back that he did this. and he went to prison for perjury. Perjury. Not all these other things, but perjury. Well, anyway, he actually somehow ended up getting that dropped, I believe, but he had to go to prison because they did say that he was a convicted sex offender, so he did his time. When he got out of prison, he filed a civil lawsuit against Larry King. He actually takes Larry King, who's involved with the Franklin cover-up, and he takes him to court and he tells a judge all these things that happened and how Larry King had him trying to get children for this sex ring and all these things. And he wins. He wins the suit. He wins $1 million against Larry King for being forced to find children, kidnap them, and put them in a sex trafficking ring. And Larry King never pays it out, but I mean, I guess that gave him some kind of like moment where people actually believed him. And here's another really interesting thing. So one of the interviewers wanted to see how credible his story was, and they basically like did an interview on him, and they said, you know what, I want you to show me where all this happened. Took them to this house, and it was completely abandoned. And he's like, this is where they kept the kids. And they're like, okay, well, show us where you kept the kids. He pulled this board out from underneath the house and went underneath it. And there was like this dug out tunnel. And the interviewers, like, you could see the astonishment on their face. So they crawl under this dug out tunnel. And there are like these boys' names carved into the wood. And he's like, this is where they put us when we had to hide. And so, like, they were excited because they were like, okay, here is, like, some kind of piece of evidence that we can trace down. Well, the owner of the house was a prison guard that just left the house and disappeared into thin air. A prison guard. Like, how is that possible? That, like, there's some kind of a law official, aren't they? So don't they have to have, like, a background check and all this stuff? Unless, you know, they're part of this like ring that's involved with this pedophile ring. Just saying. And so they couldn't find the prison guard. There's just like all these weird things that happen. Like every time they would try to track down somebody, they were gone or they didn't exist. And like there's like so much more that John DeCamp came forward to that's like, okay, like I'll tell you one more thing because it's really crazy and interesting. So he was talking about like the names of the guys. Like one of them was like Emilio, and then like I think the other one was called the General. And he said that the kids would be branded, and it was like a smiley face with an X on it. And they're like, oh yeah, that's totally true. All these children across the United States came and started writing him letters, and like they all like corroborated his story and said they used the names like Emilio took me and like the General. And what's even crazier is a couple boys came forward and showed the branding tattoo, the exact smiley face with an X on it. That was like what he had said was like a symbol that they were owned or part of the sex trafficking ring. And it was so very obvious that he was part of this. But the Des Moines Police Department would not interview him, would not put it anywhere near Johnny Gosch's case. None of it. And I just find that so incredibly sad because obviously there's some kind of a network out there and they don't want anyone to know about it. And you know what? I understand that there are times when like, you know, police officers and FBI agents, they want to protect their business. Well, it's not a business, but their people. And if they expose that there's something going on, then that puts all of them at risk. But this is pure negligence. Like on so many parts. And I think that it's coming from high up. And it's scary because if the police and the FBI are involved, then who's going to protect any of us? But that's just part of it. So as time goes on, Johnny Gosch had been missing for 30 years, and this man shows up in the White House. And this man looks a lot like Johnny Gosch, and he is a highly coveted reporter for the White House. It's like some kind of special position that only 30 people in the world get, and it's like a big deal. And he comes from nowhere, and they can't like find any information about him. And all these people are like, this is Johnny Gosch. Like, I don't know how it happened that they started saying he was Johnny Gosch. So this man's name is Jeff Gannon, and a lot of people tried to interview him, and he did interviews. And what is really strange is that, they're like, well, we can put this all to rest by you taking a DNA test and proving that you're not Johnny Gosch. And he said he would on the interview, but he refused to behind the cameras. So why wouldn't he take a DNA test and make this end if he wasn't Johnny Gosch? But here's something to think about. If Johnny Gosch had been used in sex trafficking and ended up being one of the people that had to go out and get children, or had been trafficked for a certain amount of time and became like one of the prized people that was used, and when he aged out, in order to cover up what happened to him, throw a dog a bone, and boom, you're working in the White House. And that kind of stuff does happen. Like, if you don't believe me, you can read the whole Jeffrey Epstein story, and that's just a whole other thing. But he never took a DNA test, and the resemblance between Jeff Gannon and Johnny Gosch is just like completely striking. So just think about that. Just think about that for 1 second. If Johnny Gosch ended up going and working in the White House, how far up does this go? How far up? And the thing about it is nobody wants to talk about it, which is even scarier. Like, talk about it. Tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me that that's not what happened, please. And something I did forget to mention, because I kind of went like all over the place, but during the court case, so they actually had to put up Noreen Gosch on stand, and they asked her, have you ever seen Johnny Gosch? And she went on stand and she said yes. And she said, and they were like completely shocked, like, you've talked to Johnny Gosch? And she said one day, when she was at her home, a knock on the door happened, and she answered the door, and there was Johnny. She said the eyes never changed, and he was a man, and she had him come in, and he basically told her, like, hey mom, this is what I've been doing, this is what's been happening, and I'm in this, but I just wanted to come see you. And she said that there was another person there. It was like a dark figure, but she never saw them. And she was like, well, can I help you? Can I get you some help? And he was like, no, if you get me some help, they'll kill me, and I will never be safe. And she said as quickly as he came, he completely disappeared again. A lot of people were like, well, why didn't you tell us that that happened? And she said, because it was simple. My son said he would be in danger. And I have to say, if my son told me that someone was going to kill him if I said something, I wouldn't say anything. But that was like a really big deal, because everyone's like, you know where he is. I know that I kind of zigged all over the place with this story, but it's such a crazy story because I hope you can't hear my dog. It proves that there's pedophile rings, and I've been doing a lot of research, and they're almost in every state. And some of the biggest states are Michigan, Portland, Ohio, Florida. There's some hot zones. I wanted to get this started, and in order for you to really see that this is true and it's happening, I needed you to hear about Johnny Gosch. So I hope that that was a story that shed some light on some things that you didn't know. please look up the Franklin cover-up. Check out Noreen Gosch. Google Johnny Gosch. Check out all the information I told you. And you know what? I can't wait to tell you the rest of the things because I'm going to dive deep into human trafficking. I'm really excited and I really want to help a lot of people. And knowledge is power. So let me give you my sporadic, crazy knowledge because I want to. And it's kind of my life calling, to be honest. But anyway, I love you guys. I hope you guys are having an amazing week. Halloween is on its way. Yay! And that makes me super excited. So stay spooky and stay safe. And tell me in the comments what you think about this case. Johnny Gosch is technically still missing, even though they think that he might be somebody else. But I think he's in hiding. Maybe he's dead. I'm not sure. Do you believe what I'm saying? Do you really think that there's pedophile rings? Do you think they're human trafficking rings? I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say if you don't. Yeah, so anyway, I'll say it again. Stay spooky and stay safe. Bye, guys.